Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone's doing well, and today, guys, we're back with an Empire vs. Dwarf showdown. So it's going to be Marcus Wolfhart facing off against the dreaded Rune Lord, and this is one variation of an anti-Dowie build I have been trying, because again, you guys know, for anyone who's played in tournaments, probably the worst matchup in the game for the Empire, hands down, is the Dwarves. I would say it's probably an 80-20 matchup, very consistently won by the Dwarves, and pretty much every Empire player and their dog and third cousin and sister and brother is going to be banning Dwarves if you are in a tournament setting. And of course, in quick battles, unfortunately, you just got to suffer through it. But I've been trying to figure out a way to kind of do well with this matchup, and this is a build that I've had some success with against very high-level Dwarf players. And today we face off against Onyage and his Dwarves, and he's clearly a very high-level player, so if we can have some success here, I'll certainly be quite optimistic about this build. Now, it is quad HELLSTORM rocket battery, which is only really going to work on a big map. If you play on a very small map, the Dwarves will close the distance too quickly, and typically they won't have time to really generate that value. But on a big map like Southern Chaos Wastes here, I think we're really going to see it shine. So for our infantry, it's 3 swordsmen and 2 greatswords. We do have Marcus Wolfhart for sniping the Dwarf Lords with his very good armor piercing. Triple Pistoliers are there just to shoot at Slayers. And then we have 1 unit of Grenade Launcher Outriders and a Deathcaster, as well as some Spears in the back. Now for my opponent's army, fairly standard to some respects. I mean, it's Slayers, Thunders, and Bows. He's got anti-cavalry via the Thunders and Slayers. He can deal with any of my lighter targets with Quarrelers, and Rune of Wrath and Ruin on the Rune Lord is just there to slow down, any heavy cavalry. Because typically the old school style of Empire play was like a rush, where you use like great swords with Empire Knights and various other heavy cav to get in. But I think this is much more efficient. So you can see here the Pistoliers on the flanks are going to be shooting in, going after the Ekron's Miners, and the HELLSTORM rocket batteries dropping some hot fat payloads here on the Dwarves. And so far we've gotten some okay damage on this side, not too much here. These Quarrelers definitely got pounded, but the HELLSTORMs aren't the most accurate pieces of equipment. It's more of kind of a long-term value. Eventually they do hit home, and when they do hit, it does well. But even in this looser formation the Dwarven army is in general, you can see we're getting some collateral damage, right? I'm shooting at the missile pieces, trying to take them out, which will make my mobility a little bit stronger. But in doing so, we're still hitting like Dragonback Slayers and a bunch of random units, and the entire Dwarven army overall is getting a little bit beat up here. These Quarrelers down to 55 models. My Pistoliers do pull back at this point, and now Blasting Charges do come into my Swordsmen here. So that was a misplay. You shouldn't give them that unless you absolutely have to. Or what you can do, which is even a better play, is you charge in with a cavalry unit to muck up the Miners or Blasting Charge units, and then you charge with your infantry as you disengage with Pistoliers, which is a tactic I'll illustrate for you guys right now. So you charge in from the flank, they're not going to have time to reposition, and then I charge my swordsmen at the same time. They had attack orders to do blasting charges on my swordsmen, but now they'll get some, but for the most part, it's not going to be quite as devastating there. So the swordsmen moving in, and do get a partial engage right there, and are certainly quite happy about it. Net going down here, Hunter Snare, locking these units down. Obviously, I need to delay him from getting to my HELLSTORMs for as long as possible, but you can really see the damage is starting to add up and get pretty serious. Thunders back here are almost broken. The Quarrelers here are in very, very bad shape. Greatswords have now piled in the front, which this might have been a little bit of a mistake here. Like, I feel like pushing right into the center of the Dwarven formation was a folly. I probably should have kept the Greatswords back here and then just like scattered and tried to find loose engagements, because now they're just being focus fired by a large portion of his army here, including his heroic units. Greatswords, of course, can trade okay with Dwarves, but what happens is they get focused down by the cannons and the Thunders and different missile pieces, and it's a little bit ugly. But nonetheless, we're getting through the Blasting Charge units here, as well as the Runesmith. In the meantime, Spears being forced to fight Dwarf Warriors, and Swordsmen are shattered and retreating, and the HELLSTORM still delivering some good damage across the battlefield. See, the way these Swordsmen are being used and these Greatswords a little bit better. They're not quite in the epicenter of combat, but the Greatswords, again, just going to be trying to pile in and fight wherever they can. The most important tactic here is buying time for your HELLSTORM rocket batteries to potentially win you the game. So, Sigmar Sun's moving in here against the Dwarf Warriors, and yeah, getting in there, doing some work, man. Sigmar Sun should be able to handily defeat them. Marcus Wolfhart also getting in there with his sword, figuring, we need to kind of, save our back line a little bit. And the Dwarven back line is more or less in shambles. Pistoliers have dove over here on top of the Thunder pieces. Who needs Empire Knights when you have the brave Pistoliers of Sigmar? And the other one's going to be going after the Thunder units while they're being chased by Slayers. So we should be able to route the missile pieces. These Thunders are shut down by the Pistoliers. And we are actually ahead on the balance of power, which is certainly a very nice feeling when you're playing Empire against Dwarves. It doesn't happen often, so you have to savor it when it does. But again, I have 4 HELLSTORMs. When he does get closer, things are going to get a little bit spicy. So my crew has been dropped. We're going to start running, and these Sigmarites better have been working on their cardio. Spirit Leech going down to the Dragonback Slayers, but I do leave my Amethyst Wizard there too long, and he's going to get karate chopped a little bit here by the Dragonback Slayers and pay a partial Troll Toll. Not the worst thing in the world, but certainly not a good situation either. Anyways, this HELLSTORM rocket battery shooting into the Dwarf Warriors here as the Spearmen attack them in the back, and the other HELLSTORM crew is going to be pulling away. And thankfully, my Amethyst Wizard doesn't die here. It does get broken, but on the horse, I should be able to escape. And basically just using Marcus to methodically shoot here at the Dragonback Slayers. I haven't shot too many targets yet, but we have been able to do some good damage against Slayers. And now that most of my artillery pieces are offline and being chased down by the Dwarves, Runes of Wrath and Ruin, of course, being used to slow them and make them so they can't get away. The bounce power is even, but still causing a lot of disruption in the backfield here. We do get onto the Quarrelers. Unfortunately, I do get caught by the Slayers partially, and a little bit of a lapse of micro on my part. And he does use a Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin to slow me down, and I will be losing a lot of Pistoliers here, which definitely sucks. But we do use the Hunter Snare here, which is going to allow me to at least salvage a couple of grenade launchers, which are in very bad shape. Still going to break, but hopefully will come back, and the Hunter Snare did prevent that unit from more or less being wiped out. Here, the Pistoliers have shattered 2 Dwarven missile units. We got great swords and just loose units all over the battlefield. This has turned into an extremely close game. Balance power is more or less dead even. And unfortunately, this is really big. The fact that I can't stabilize my HELLSTORM rocket battery crew is costing me quite a bit. If I could get a single HELLSTORM back online, that would be devastating. But the Dwarves still do have relative dominance in this part of the battlefield. So even if I did get the crew away from these Slayers, I don't know if I'd be able to actually get back onto the piece. Marcus Wolfhart just kiting and fighting right here. He's just going to be running and shooting, being chased by Slayers. Marcus does have 36 speed. Slayers are 40. They're a little bit quicker, so that's a little bit precarious. But we will be getting some Pistoliers and I think some grenade launchers to rip some shots into the Slayers here, which is exactly why you bring them. Slayers are devastating. The Empire really does struggle to deal with them, so you need to bring some answers, and I think the grenade launchers and Pistoliers are a good answer. Although this game, my Outrider grenade launcher micro was very sloppy. And in all, honestly, I shouldn't have taken any damage at all with perfect micro. But again, there was lots of micro. My artillery pieces, running with my characters, choosing the engagements. But I think if you can have impervious or at least very, very good micro with your grenade launchers and can remove their missile threats, you can just straight up win the game with the unit of grenade launchers against Dwarves. It can be very, very strong. Swordsmen chasing down the Dragonback Slayers. Marcus Wolfhart now ripping pot shots here into the Rune Lord, which is certainly good. And we'll do a little bit of fast forwarding as the game does get grindy. It's a lot of chasing things off. We have one unit of swordsmen here, the Sigmar Sons, fighting to the bitter end against Dwarf Warriors, which is good. It's occupying a large portion of the Dwarf army, which is allowing me to snipe his Lord. Marcus Wolfhart using the focus shot, and we do nail the Rune Lord, and the Rune Lord's going to get 360 no-scoped here. We'll get you guys a cinematic of that. Got 117. Marcus Wolfhart, the Huntsman, he can't hit things up close, but from a distance. Can't hit things from a distance either, but this Rune Lord certainly has got some moves. Let's go ahead and watch this Benny Hilling and see if Marcus can do it. Okay, trying to guess where the Rune Lord's going. But now the Rune Lord is broken, so he's not going to be able to juke anymore, and Marcus does finally get the very anticlimactic shot right there. So good juking for my opponent. Bounce power is relatively even, but a little bit Dwarf favored. I still have a ton of Swordsmen and Spearmen on the other side, dropping Spirit Leeches onto the Slayer units, because again, that is kind of the biggest issue I'm going to be running into. And just continuing to use the last of Marcus's ammo just to shoot down Slayers, and the Dwarves are going to be regrouping their forces. My Sigmar Sons, again, fight to the bitter end, doing quite well for themselves, while I do regroup my Swordsmen and my other units. Very, very razor-thin game here. Swordsmen do form ranks. The Pistolier squad is able to break those Dwarf Warriors in the distance, and we do pull back here for a moment while Marcus shoots. My Pistoliers get in range. We're trying to drop some shots into the Slayer, so I net them down, but leadership really fickle here. He wasn't quite out of ammo, and a lot of my Pistoliers do kind of get broken as I blitz in to try and take out the Slayer units, but we do break the Miners, I think. I think they're at 1 leadership, something like that. So the Swordsmen might be able to kind of break them down. A couple of my Pistoliers do get back. And yeah, this is going to be a real nail-biter of a game. He doesn't have any leadership. There's no Lord outside of the Runesmith. Obviously, well, that's a very silly statement. Of course there isn't. But yeah, Pistolier is going to be shooting into the Slayers here. A really nice blasting charge. He had a couple left from the Ekron's Miners, which actually does a substantial amount of damage to my Swordsmen. And now Marcus is going to be getting chased by Dragonback Slayers, which we will be countercharging here with our Pistoliers, trying to knock those guys down. Pick off a couple models here and there. They still have 6, which is unfortunate. But the other blasting charges do break my Swordsmen. So now my Spearman and my Caster is forced into fight, which is really not a good situation. And, if there were no Slayers here, if we had managed to finish off the Slayers, I think we could win the game with Marcus as well as the Amethyst Wizard. But with the amount of Slayers left, which isn't many, mind you, 10 plus 5 plus 20. Yeah, so it's what, 35 Slayers left on the battlefield? That's all it takes here in the later stages of the game, because Marcus is going to struggle to kill even 5 Dragonback Slayers. So we do charge in, we kite back a little bit, still ripping shots over here. You can see the Dwarves getting a nice grindy combat in against my Spearman and my Caster. And at this point, all I have is Marcus, who again is losing to 4 or 5 Slayers here. And that is going to be pretty much all she wrote. So GG, well played to my opponent. It was a very close game, and obviously a matchup which is horrendous for the Empire, which I was very happy with the outcome. I was happy with the build. I think I have some tweaks to kind of finalize this build and make it actually, it was formidable there. That game was winnable. Again, more optimal Pistolier micro, not taking stupid damage from missile units that we can easily juke and outpace, keeping the grenade launchers alive to the 4th quarter. If they had been alive there, we would have just wiped the floor with the rest of that infantry and it would have been fine, right? But those are the little things. You can't afford to make too many mistakes in that matchup as the Empire. But I do like this build. I think it has some teeth. Well played to Onyage. Certainly a very strong opponent, a great guy as well. So it was fun to test this build against a top-level player to see if it actually had some teeth, and I think it did. So well played again to my opponent. let's go to the drawing board and kind of, I think there's some fine tuning. I don't know how sold the great swords did good, but I found the dwarves were so good at focusing them down. Maybe you just bank more on the attrition from the Hellstorms and get more bodies to deal with basically just the dwarven pressure. Because like the great swords, yeah, they'll win their fights, but they tend to just get focused down in my experience. Empire versus dwarves, yeah, this is kind of what we had. I'm thinking maybe if you cut the great swords and just get more swordsmen. Yeah, so you get more swordsmen. That's a lot more infantry. And we could even get some unbreakable troops is kind of something else I was thinking about. Spirit Leech, do we want any other magic? I'm trying to think if there's any other lore magic which might objectively be better. I think mixing in a Witch Hunter too is good for those like attrition type games. He can really kite and be really, really obnoxious. So something like this already feels better. Although we probably want to cut you guys. And maybe if we could get like 2 flagellants here, that would just be money. Flagellants, of course, are pretty bad, but bad against armor, but they trade okay. Do we need the focus shot too? I mean, maybe not. Maybe just the net. Do we want accusation? Not super important. I think we just go bare bones. Like, this feels better already. And then we can do this. Because it's more troops in general, or I guess somewhere, yeah, it's more or less the same, but you also get the Witch Hunter. Witch Hunters are very, very good against Dowie. They can just run and kite all day, and they actually hit surprisingly hard, despite 25% mitigation. Or you could cut the 2... you could cut the Witch Hunter and basically just get 2 Spearmen with, or at least 2 basic Spearmen. So then you have like a ton of infantry, and it's just like screening and letting the Hellstorms do more. Ideally. I think this variant's really good. I think the other variant with the Witch Hunter is good as well, but we're going to save this for now. Empire versus Dwarfs, because I do want to get to the point where I can surprise people with it in tournaments, but again, I guess the problem with me surprising people is if they see the video on my channel, they know it's there, and I kind of just get screwed. So anyways, maybe you guys can use it. Have some fun, enjoy it, and aside from that, we will see you guys on the other side. Well played against my opponent, and take care, my friends.